Dr. Peter Tierney, how lovely to have you on the Performance People podcast. I'm just going to explain to people who you are and what you do. A senior research scientist with a PhD in sports science and a diploma in data analytics, which all sounds terribly serious and terribly important. You've worked with Leinster Rugby Club, with Chelsea Football Club, with Lululemon and the FA. So countless people that you've worked alongside and focused particularly on the pieces around performance, which is why you're so brilliant to have on our podcast. I wanted to concentrate this 15 minutes, if we will, on quick wins for better sleep and recovery. And I know you have a sleep acronym, so I thought we could perhaps dive a bit deeper into that and break it down for people into sections and why and how they can get better sleep and recovery and better performance as a result of that.
I shared a sort of a sleep acronym that I find some of these just as high level reminders and sort of things you can save or even print out and have, particularly around athletes in their recovery areas or, if it's general population, just even maybe in the bedroom or just on your phone. So the sleep acronym is just one of those. And the
so what does sleep stand for as a whole?
Yeah, so the S stands for same time to bed and to wake up. So really that's the main thing around sleep is sleep regularity and duration. So trying to achieve, somewhere between 7 and 9 hours every night. But we're seeing a little bit more research now highlighting the importance of trying to go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time. So that's one that I think a lot of people do struggle with. There's always going to be challenges.
And that dives in, for me, that dives into routine.
Definitely.
That's about, and I think what we definitely learn from being associated with sports teams is 100% routine is however mundane it is, it works, doesn't it?
That's probably the power is in the routine. So that's the first one, and that's just so happens to fall as S is the first letter, which is great. L then I would say is light in the morning and dark at night. And so that plays into, I guess, circadian rhythm and trying to achieve, again, it sort of supports the first one of getting into routine. So when you're up in the morning trying to get some sunlight is definitely the most powerful light. And
why does that make such a difference for people if they don't already know about it? Why is that so significant?
Yeah, so there's some evidence, and I'm probably not the expert in sort of circadian biology and that type of thing, but the evidence does point towards particularly the power of light in the morning. So there is some research, and there's also some changing research around the sort of blue light and light at nighttime, maybe not having as big of an impact, but certainly that morning part has powerful impacts in your sleep at nighttime. And I'm not going to say that the blue light or the screen time doesn't have a negative impact, but often it's because it's sort of delaying the onset of sleep as opposed to maybe the negative impacts itself.
Which is why we should put phones down.
Yeah, so more so because people tend to scroll for a little bit longer or watch something a little bit longer, and it's actually just eating into that sleeping window as well. So it's having sort of secondary.
Isn't that true?
Effects.
Because I was thinking to myself only last night, like if I know that if I just put everything down an hour earlier, like you say, you're not eating into that window, which is so precious and you're not going to get back, but we still do it.
Yeah.
So we have to remind ourselves.
Sometimes try to put the phone outside your room and charge it if you can. I sometimes leave it out overnight and just charge it in the kitchen. And then when the alarm goes off, you sort of have to get up and go get it. So that's a little trick as well that some people use.
Okay. And then we're on to the first E.
One I would say is eating. For me, this holistic approach with sleep, nutrition, activity is something you'll see, in everything I share. I just don't think you can have one without the other in terms of the impact that it can have on your health. So eating appropriately,
what is eating appropriately? Because we hear healthy eating, in the vernacular all the time. But what actually does that look like?
How long do we have for this?
You've got about 2 minutes on this
2 minutes. I think for me, it's eating within your energetic needs. So and again, this is where if you're more active, you need to eat more to support the activity levels that you have. If you're less active, I would say you probably need a little bit less. There's now obviously evidence around the certain levels of protein that you need to help maintain lean mass and muscle mass, which we know are important for aging and physical performance. And then there's the sort of hydration and micronutrient and vitamin and amino acid and all the other pieces as well that are important.
Does supplementation come into that as well? Does that come into that E sort of?
It definitely does, yeah. So eating or nutrition, and I probably fit it into eating, so it fits the acronym more than anything, but certainly does because, the ideal diet, probably you get all of these things from food sources, but that's actually really difficult to do. And I guess the example being a key supplement is like vitamin D, where people, particularly where we are in the world, struggle through getting sufficient sunlight during the winter. So supplementing with vitamin D is often recommended. And you can get it through dietary sources, but it's actually difficult to achieve the sufficient levels to do that. So hence you'd recommend a supplement. And that can be the same for other things as well.
And I do think definitely from our sort of working on the formulations with night powder and day powder, just almost sort of looking really carefully at not just the ingredient quality, but also the meaningful dosage piece, because you get a bunch of supplements out on the market, right, that have got 75 ingredients, 95 ingredients, whatever that looks like. Does that mean they're better?
No, well, this is an important point actually on supplements, because one, for athletes in particular, they need to be tested so that they know there's nothing that they're not supposed to be taking in the supplement. But
the informed sport testing.
The informed sport testing. Yeah. But often what you'll find with supplements is they may not have the sufficient dose. So researchers will look at any sort of supplement or ingredient, and they'll use specific doses. And obviously over time that we learn more and more about the sort of minimum required dose to elicit a positive effect, for example, on sleep. But sometimes you'll find in supplements that they have the ingredients and they're able to reference the literature that supports its use, but it might be 1/10 or even maybe 1/100th of the effective dose.
That's a really good point. So it's an EFSA claim for the sake of an EFSA claim, but it's not actually doing you necessarily what you need or require.
Yeah, so that's an important one for supplementation within that bucket of eating and nutrition and a sort of diet within that E as well in the sleep acronym.
Okay, the second E is environment. Just explain this one.
Yeah, so environment for me would be anything to do with your actual bedroom. So for me, just firstly, even from a psychological perspective, just making it the place that you sleep and making it really calm and quiet. If you can avoid in your own sort of personal situation, avoid working from there so that your mind or your brain and yourself, you just associate your room with calm and sleep. You also want it to be cool enough and dark enough to help you get to sleep. We know falling asleep, you need to drop your core body temperature a little bit as well. So that can help. So that second E is really just all about your environment, making it comfortable, calm, relaxing, and just the place that you want to go to wind down and to fall asleep comfortably.
So that's completely fine, except for when you introduce travel into the equation. So if you're talking about, and you've worked with countless athletes, you're talking about the fact that they're on the road a lot and they're having to then perform on the road because they're having to sleep in random places and globally travel for their events. I mean, a lot of business people, a lot of CEOs are also experiencing the same sort of thing. How do you manage that when obviously it's not a controlled environment in the way that home is?
It's really tricky, and that is one of the biggest challenges with sort of any sort of travel. One of the things I have done in the past is we've traveled to hot climates for just competitions. And I mean, this would be the same for anybody, but we've called ahead to say, can you try turn the air conditioning on in all of the rooms that we're checking into so that if we're arriving in late and it's warm, at least their room is sort of cool. And can you support by putting some water for hydration and all these small pieces you can do. Some people and some athletes travel with things that they have in their own bedroom. So whether that's their own pillow, or even some athletes have brought like a teddy or just something that they can
I've taken to sleeping with a silk pillow.
Oh, okay. You'll have to travel with that.
I will share that with you. Yeah. As I've got older, I read somewhere that it really helps with a wrinkle-free complexion. So anything I can take, I'm taking it. So yes, that's my latest sort of fad.
So that can be one. And also just in different environments, you can have noise from outside. So, if you are traveling and you're a business person, you can be staying in the city centre and that can be quite noisy. So I have used in the past myself, and I know people do travel with sort of white noise machines, or you can just use your phone and there's apps and sort of overnight songs you can just play overnight. It's enough noise at a certain frequency that won't disrupt your sleep, but it might help sort of mute some of the sharper noises around the hotel that you're staying in.
Okay, and to complete the acronym, we're on P.
Yeah. So P, I say, is physical activity. And this is, again, pretty linked to the point that I said earlier on, in that I can't separate or dissociate sleep, activity, and nutrition. So those three are the sort of pillars of just health and performance. And so for me, I think if you're physically tired and you've been active enough throughout the day, that is a big contributor to helping you feel tired before going to sleep. And so it may not be one that's as commonly spoken about in terms of sleep, but I do think that's an important one from the overall health picture, but also just supporting with a little bit of fatigue towards the end of the day and actually feeling a little bit sleepy and drowsy.
It's funny, isn't it? We see it in our kids. I was just looking at my little one this morning who took ages to wake up this morning. And reason being is he had forest school yesterday. So was physically completely exhausted. And you see it in little ones and you know that's no different for us, is it? Like if you're physically drained, you will go to sleep quicker and easier and you will probably sleep for longer and better.
Yeah. And also the relationship goes the other way as well. If you're not sleeping as much, for example, that will have an impact on how hungry you are the next day. And I personally always find that, and that is what the evidence shows as well, is that if you sleep less or your sleep is restricted or the quality is reduced, it can have impacts and you'll feel hungrier. So you might eat more and that might have impacts again on longer term health things. So all of these things I think are interconnected. And
a broader question on, because we started this by talking about the quick wins for better sleep and recovery, but how important is sleep fundamentally for recovery?
It's huge, and it is probably the most important thing. So obviously you'll have seen all of these sort of recovery tools, and I don't want to sort of diminish the impact they can have, because particularly when time is sort of people are under time pressure, particularly athletes, but also just everybody in life. And when an athlete has to recover from a game and then train to a high level within 48 hours, they need to help accelerate that process. So sleep and food and hydration are obviously those sort of basics that you have to nail. But on top of that, obviously there are some other behaviors and tools that you can use to do that. But those tools can't replace the sort of sleep and the fundamentals that you have. So, using massage guns and foam rollers and ice baths and everything else are great, but only when you have that sort of sleep foundation in place.
And, data analytics is your thing. How much attention should we pay to technical devices that are monitoring and tracking our sleep?
So
our recovery?
I'm actually a big fan of these, and I think they're bringing really good awareness to people. And the analogy that I use for wearable technology for people who are maybe a little bit on the fence is I see wearable technology like Google Maps or City Mapper. And I think, you yourself have to set the goal or the destination that you're going to, but Google Maps might help you navigate the most efficient route there. Also, you might know the way to where you're going, but you might know that there's a crash or an accident or a delay, or there's a better route that you can take to get to that goal. And so Google Maps in that sense will help you get to where you want to be. And I think wearable technology is great in that sense, in that it's not going to dictate what your goal is, but it's going to help you identify behaviors and potential flags. So one of the best uses for wearables is illness detection. And if something flags your resting heart rate and temperature increase, but you reflect and you haven't drank alcohol, or you haven't done anything yesterday that should sort of elicit that response, that can be a really good flag to help you just make decisions for the following day as well. So that's the sort of analogy I use for technology.
It's a good one. I like it because you're not relying on it. It's not everything, but it just can help you along the way. Final question then, Dr. Peter. I want to ask you to tell us what we can learn from athletes about better sleep and performance. That's the world that you've lived in for many years. What can we pull and extrapolate from what they know about better sleep and recovery and apply it to our lives?
I would say the biggest thing for them is they plan it. And so they get help from coaches and support network and staff and researchers, but they plan. So during the week, you might even look at their calendars, and some of them might put it in as in sleep from 10 to 7 or whatever time they might try to get to sleep for. And you'll see that that's one, hopefully relatively consistent across the week. But even, obviously a lot of athletes play evening fixtures or travel, and they might not get to sleep until 2, 3 a.m. But they've planned for that. So they might plan a nap the following day. They might plan a little bit more sleep the night before. And so I think most of it is just actually, they're sitting down a week in advance or a month in advance by themselves or with their support network and making adjustments so that they overall in the course of the week, their sleep hasn't been impacted. They're eating the right things to fuel their performance and their recovery, and their activity levels are sort of supported as well. So a lot of it is, planning, maybe using your calendar. And that's what I spend a bit of time every Sunday sort of planning out the week in terms of when I want to exercise and travel and those types of things. So that's one that, again, it probably isn't going to catch headlines. It's a little bit boring, but that's probably the one thing that people could do better to replicate what athletes do.
From now on, I'm going to diarise my sleep. That's what's happening next week. Brilliant. Peter, thanks so much.
No problem.